Clerk, could you take the roll call?
Chairman Barrows,
Present.
Representative Baginski,
Present.
Representative Diaz. Present. Representative Hull,
Present.
Representative Quattrucci, and Representative DeBonne. Here. Okay, we have a call.
Thank you, Chris. So now we're going to turn it over to Sharon, who will give us a briefing.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the subcommittee. Tonight you have 4 state agency budgets that you're going to be hearing, and to make this a little simpler in terms of laying the foundation before you hear from the agencies, we're just going to run through some summaries of what we see as being included in the governor's budget, and then any relevant background that might be helpful as you consider this. I'll also at this point put in a plug for our full budget analysis document that you got a hard copy of today. It's also been posted on the website. That has much more information than is contained in these presentations, and a lot more detail if anyone's interested. So again, just for simplicity, I'm going to present all of the information to you. We, of course, have the staff who did the individual agency work here in case you have questions I'm unable to answer. And then you can move on to your agencies and the public testimony. So we're going to start with the judiciary. And as always, include for you some big picture slides about the budget as enacted in December, as well as the revisions contained in the governor's budget. This is a $120 to $124 million budget. Most of the funding comes from general revenues. And the changes for fiscal 22 are primarily general revenues, though there's some RICAP changes. And most of the funding for the courts is spent on staff. That's nearly 3/4 of the budget for full-time equivalent positions. A little bit of history, at least recent history, on the enacted budget has 726.3 FTEs. You can see that the agency requested that same number, and that is what the governor has included. No changes to the budget adopted in December for fiscal 2021. Just by way of information, as of mid-April, there are 673.4 filled positions, meaning nearly 53 vacancies. For fiscal 2020, the courts averaged 685 filled positions. This is actually a high number of filled positions for the courts, given the recent history, which is shown here on this slide. Again, just as a little bit of background on number of filled FTEs. So as we always do when we talk about the courts, we cover some of the overhead functions of the courts, and then we'll just give you a quick overview of some of the work of the individual courts. So the changes to the 2022 budget are primarily what we call current service changes, and that is adjustments based on current activity without necessarily major initiatives included. Any exceptions to that I will note as I go through this. This kind of shows you where the funding changes are for this section of the budget. A total of $1.4 million more than enacted for fiscal 21. As a reminder, the budget includes money to pay for pensions on a pay-as-you-go basis. This is primarily general revenues, $4.5 million. This is for an older subset of judges' benefits that previous to the paying into the system, which started back in 1990. There's funding for court technology, $6.9 million, and there's about 17 staff dedicated to that. This is just a little bit more than was enacted for 2021. In terms of facilities and operations, another $7.8 million and a dozen FTEs across all judicial complex facilities. This is for the main upkeep and maintenance, repairs. Other overhead functions include just your generic back office functions, finance, HR, and then also community outreach and support. The numbers for what's in the budget are included here. We would note that these contain current service adjustments, and there's no turnover savings included for any of these operations, so that assumes full funding for all the positions included. Another major area of expenditure in the court's budget is for indigent defense. This is instances where the court needs to appoint legal representation when the public defender has a conflict of interest, so it's unable to represent a defendant. There's $5 million in fiscal 21 revised, and for fiscal 2022, it's a little bit less than was enacted based on current spending projections. As we move on to the individual courts, we'll just summarize each one for you, starting with the Supreme Court. 5 judges, but there are a total of almost 34 positions supporting the operations, $8.6 million for fiscal 2022. Again, most of this is current service adjustments, although it does restore some turnover savings that was included in the enacted budget. As you also know, as part of Article 1, the General Assembly identifies some specific appropriations to certain community organizations. In the case of the courts, there are 2 instances of that. The Coalition Against Domestic Violence, $230,000, and Rhode Island Legal Services, $90,000. Both of those are included in the governor's budget, same as was enacted for fiscal 2021. One item that is a little bit different in this budget than in the fiscal 21 budget deals with criminal injuries compensation. Under this general law, 15% of court fees are dedicated to, right now, justice assistance. However, it's not to exceed $150,000. All the other money goes towards the Crime Victims Compensation Program, which is housed in the Office of General Treasurer. You've heard over time how that money has been declining. So right now, the courts have a contract with justice assistants for almost $170,000, so that's a little bit over the maximum allowed by law. So the governor's budget corrects the funding in the courts to ensure that the courts only retain the 15% according to the law. That actually means $80,000 less from this source for justice assistants, but that is swapped out and paid for with general revenues. So justice assistance stays whole, and those excess funds actually show up in the treasurer's office. But for the purposes of the uses being included here in this budget, they are unchanged. It's just the source that changes. Moving on to the Superior Court, which has jurisdiction over felony and misdemeanor cases appealed or waived from district court. 27 judges or magistrates and a total of 167 FTEs. The budget includes $25.6 million for fiscal 2022. This is almost $2 million more than was enacted for fiscal 21, and most of that is current service adjustments and restoring some turnover savings that were assumed in fiscal 21. District Court, 16 judges or magistrates and 95 total staff. That's about $15 million for fiscal 22. District Court covers small claims, violations of municipal ordinances and regulations, and has specialty courts such as the Drug Court and the Veterans Court. This is about $600,000 more than enacted. This, again, current service adjustments, and adds money back where turnover savings were assumed in the enacted budget. Similar reason for the changes in family court as well, but overall that's 21 judges and magistrates, about 173 total staff, and $27 million for fiscal 2022. And Traffic Tribunal, 8 judges and magistrates, 76 FTEs, same idea, $9.8 million with current service adjustments and reductions to turnover savings. And finally, Workers' Compensation Court. This has 10 judges and 50 positions. You'll note that this court is actually funded from restricted receipts, which are workers' compensation specific funds, but the changes are similar to other courts. There's also annual funding for the Commission on Judicial Tenure and Discipline. That's a 14-member commission that serves without compensation. The budget funds just one position, which has always been the case. I'm going to move on to the capital plan, and that includes several projects, most of which are ongoing asset protection and judicial complex projects. We've listed them here. They are not new. You've been seeing these for years, so we're happy to try and answer any questions if you have them. But you'll see that for the most part, the funding the state provides is to do upkeep of the facilities the courts maintain. If there's no questions or you want to hold them either way, I can move on to the Attorney General's budget. Okay, will do. Okay, so moving on to the budget recommendations for the Office of the Attorney General. As you know, the Attorney General is the central legal agency of the state, prosecuting all criminal felony cases and misdemeanor appeals, representing state agencies, departments, and commissions, and it initiates litigation to protect the interests of Rhode Island citizens. This funding is divided into 4 programs: the Criminal Division, the Civil Division, the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and sort of a general administrative component. So the total funding is shown in this slide, how that splits out. We're going to give you one for each year. The enacted budget being $33.8 million for 239.1 FTEs. Very little change in the revised budget. Most of it has to do with some escrow accounts that were converted into restricted receipts. We talked a little bit about this in prior hearings. The 2022 request shows $34.5 million and 4 additional FTEs. By category, as with the other agencies, you can see most of the expenses are in salaries and benefits. And by fund source, most of the money comes from state general revenues, a small amount of capital funds, some limited federal and restricted sources, and funding made available from a special forfeiture settlement originating through an investigation involving Google. So looking at the changes the governor has proposed for fiscal 21 and 22, they kind of hit all the same issues, so we'll go through them together. I'll just note that the governor has submitted a couple of amendments to adjust federal funds for the Attorney General, so we'll just talk about those federal fund changes as we go. As I mentioned, there's some escrow accounts showing up in the operating budget. These used to be sort of off budget, as we talked about before. The Auditor General and Accounts and Control have determined that these were not really the right classification for these accounts, so they've been converted to a restricted receipt account, and so now they show up in the operating budget where they didn't before. Funds were being spent before, they just weren't showing up in the budget. So that includes the money for the automated fingerprint identification system, and then what's left of a nearly 10-year-old mortgage settlement that had previously been done this way, but it's about $100,000 left for that. There's also a number of grants in the governor's revised 21 budget that were not included in the enacted budget. This happens in particular when agencies are noted after the fact that they've received a grant, so you'll sometimes see these included. So there's a new grant from having to do with the statistics and reporting of criminal history. There's also a victims liaison grant, and this particular grant is a $450,000 grant over 3 years. There's some technical issues with how it's shown in the budget. I think it's intended to be shown over 3 years, but as submitted, the $450,000 shows up in the first year, and then the amendments add to that rather than spread it out. So you'll probably need some technical adjustments to how that's shown. There's also a Department of Justice grant that's available through the end of September. That's also at $340,000 with some. It's intended to have $175,000 for fiscal 21 and $165,000 for fiscal 22. So probably just need some technical adjustments on how that's shown. In terms of overall staffing, the budget recommends 243.1 positions. As is often the case, not all of the positions are actually funded because there's churn in the agencies and there's often vacancies. So the budget does not fund 6.3 of them. And as I mentioned, as of April 10th, 231.2 positions are filled. You can see here that the agency actually asked for 8 new positions. The governor's budget funded 4 of them. The request came in at 4 new positions for the criminal division, 3 attorneys and 1 paralegal to help with intake and processing. The civil division was looking for 4 additional positions, 2 each attorneys and paralegals to assist with complex litigation. What came through in the governor's budget was 4 new positions, 2 each in the criminal and civil division, and in each case an attorney and a paralegal. So the rest of the budget essentially is current service funding for the remaining positions. There's also a little bit of money left from the Volkswagen settlement that was awarded back in 2019. $4.1 million was given to the Attorney General to provide to environmentally beneficial projects, and we've listed here how that money went out to other state agencies and other entities. There's also a grant in the enacted budget, about $300,000 for a victims outreach project. It's not included in the 22 budget with the expectation that it would have been finished. We believe that some of that money is going to need to be shifted to 2022 because the project is still underway. And just as a reminder, I mentioned a little while ago that there was a major settlement regarding the state's involvement in a criminal investigation regarding Google, where the state received a lot of money through the federal forfeiture program. $60 million went to the Attorney General's office. Much of that was used on capital projects. There's still a little bit of money remaining, mostly for building repairs and upkeep. These are shown here. Some of that money has been dedicated over time from that forfeiture source, and the state has always provided some money from its own pay-as-you-go capital funds for upkeep at the facilities used by the Attorney General's office. All the other expenses, which is the smallest component of all the spending, is for just your general, maintenance, office, technology, etc. And 22 budget's a little bit lower than the fiscal 21, and most of that is just lining up historical expenses. There were some funds reappropriated from fiscal 20 and included in the 21 budget. Those would be considered one-time. Those have been removed. And all the other adjustments are effectively lining up with current expenditure projections. I'm going to move on to the Office of Public Defender. And this office has been around for decades, and it has offices located in all the 5 judicial complexes, and it provides legal representation for adults and juveniles without the financial resources to obtain private counsel. And its services span a number of courts. As I mentioned in the discussion of the judiciary's budget, when the interest of a client is adverse to that of another client, one of the clients is referred to the indigent defense program through the courts, where somebody is assigned another attorney. There's been some discussion over the last several years regarding the caseload standards and proper staffing for this office, and so we've included some information we've provided to you in the past regarding caseload standards by type, and that's 150 cases per attorney, and misdemeanor 400 cases per attorney. There was a study done regarding, it was called the Rhode Island Project back in 2017, that the Public Defender's Office had requested, and this was meant to establish some sort of workload standards for the state. The report found that the office needed an additional 87 attorneys to provide reasonably effective assistance of counsel. They currently have 52. It didn't deal with the indigent defense component, but you can see that as we go through the requests, there was requests for additional staffing related to this, and the governor provided some of that. So like the other agencies, total funding for the enacted and the governor's revised and the governor's 22 budget is summarized here, showing you the 3 additional positions as well. And with most of the funding goes right to staffing costs. The public defender had requested 6 new attorneys to help with the caseload issue noted earlier, and the governor provided 3 of those 6. The public defender currently has 93 of its 96 positions filled. Most of them are funded. What that means is there's not a lot of turnover assumed in the budget. An average of 2.3 positions would remain vacant over 2 years to achieve that, over 1 year to achieve that. In terms of regular operating expenses, not unlike the AG, these are just your general office supplies, rent, parking, et cetera, and some minor grant expenses. I'm going to move on to the Department of Public Safety. As we wrap this up, most of you recall that the Department of Public Safety is the consolidated public safety agency that was established back in 2008 with the intent of achieving certain efficiencies regarding training and facilities. At that time, the Superintendent of State Police was deemed to be serving as the director of the department. The sheriffs were folded in 2018. But then the Fire Marshal's office was moved out and into the Department of Business Regulation in 2018. Sorry, sheriffs in 2011, Fire Marshal moved out in 2018. So the current divisions of the department are shown here, and we'll take you through each one and note any changes from current service as we go. Overall, it's a $134 million budget in fiscal 21 and $138 million in fiscal 22. Again, most of the expenses are tied up in staffing, as shown on this slide here. In terms of the revised budget recommendation, nearly the only change is shifting additional costs over to newly available coronavirus relief funds. As you recall from our initial budget overviews and other discussions, a number of things happened after you adopted the 2021 budget, including the extension of the available use of the coronavirus relief funds, which was great, except you had sort of mostly accounted for them, except there was an additional provision. The federal government decided to waive the 25% FEMA match on a lot of spending you had outstanding, and coronavirus relief funds were dedicated to that. So in relieving the state of that expense, those funds could be put to use in the Department of Public Safety, and that's what you see here, an additional $20 million of funds used that way. Overall, you started the fiscal 21 enacted with $40 million of CRF funds used like that, and once adjusted for a requested budget amendment, you have $60 million. So a full $20 million of additional budgetary relief shows up in the DPS budget from this. On top of that, major sort of flexible funding, Rhode Island also received $4.5 million to state and local entities for a wide variety of expenses. We would just note that that money has not yet been budgeted or allocated within this budget. Looks like about $3.2 million that can be used for some of the same things that the CRF money is used for. Just going through, you can see that the bulk of the DPS budget does go towards its largest division, the state police. In terms of FTEs, across all divisions, the 22 budget assumes less than 10 positions are vacant on average. And the staffing by division is shown in this slide here. Again, you can see the largest entity being the Division of State Police, the second largest sheriffs at 181 positions. The change you see in the state police has to do with bringing on a new class, and the Capitol Police has one additional new position. And central management is unchanged, and just current service adjustments for that. Moving into changes by division, we'll go into 911. You recall that the Assembly in 2019 transitioned the 911 budget to being funded through a restricted receipt account, funded by the wireless, wired, and prepaid phones, 50 cents per line. This was originally done on an October 1st basis, so fiscal 21 was the first full year. So if you look at this slide, it kind of shows you that The receipts are coming in around over $8 million annually. The expenses are coming in under that, so there's a little bit of a balance available, which was, intended to be available for some fixed costs and to cover costs when the receipts are not growing as quickly as the costs are. Looking at the enacted budget expenses, most of it, again, goes to salaries and benefits, but there's money budgeted for certain upgrades as well as ongoing expenses. And so the 21 governor's revision shows a little bit less for salaries and benefits. That's mostly just turnover. And then you can see that the technology upgrades are funded $2.3 million really over the 2-year period. It covers things like the fiber optics upgrade, emergency medical dispatch, and then other technology upgrades. I've just included some of this here because this has been a high interest item to see that 911 has the appropriate money to cover some of the new technology it needs. And so we'll leave this information here for you. And moving on to the sheriff's. The sheriff's budget is less than $1 million more than the prior year, with most of this again being current service adjustments. They provide courthouse and courtroom security, prisoner transport, extradition, process service. It's always been 100% general revenue funded. The only departure from that has been that use of CRF funds. So we're not distinguishing between state general revenues and those CRF funds so as not to distort how that looks. So if you look at this slide, you can see that the 21 budget, $21.3 million. The governor's revised budget slightly higher. A lot of the across all state agencies, there was an adjustment, a statewide adjustment that had to do with assessed fringe benefits, which was really just a way the state accounts for certain costs. And in this case, this has to do with paying for the voluntary retirement incentives. So all agencies had a minor adjustment to their budget to account for that. And then you can see that, again, the 22 budget is very similar. Staffing is unchanged. There are 12 current vacancies. Some of that's coming through retirement and other attrition. It had the sheriff's averaged almost 16 vacancies across all of fiscal 22. There was a graduating class of sheriffs in December where 17 new ones were hired. There are currently about 10 sheriffs currently receiving injured on duty benefits. That number was much higher in the past, and you adopted some reforms in order to lower that number. Moving on to the Capitol Police, these folks perform the public safety functions for buildings and courthouses, 52 FTEs total in the governor's budget, which is one more than authorized. They're generally funded from state general revenues, but also through internal service funds where their costs are billed to the agencies who use them. 38 of them go right to general revenues, 14 are billed out to agency and departments, so they're just shown as operating expenses in those agencies. So you won't see their salaries and benefits show up in this budget. So you can see very minor changes again from the prior year. And then there's Municipal Police and Training Academy, which provides the training for municipal police recruits. It's just 2 FTEs, same as it's been for the past many years. $800,000 budget, very little change. And now on to the state police, the largest component. 296 positions for fiscal 21 revised and 324 for fiscal 22. That's 28 new positions, and that relates to a new trooper class. As you've been seeing in other places, these are the expenditures by category, and here are some of the items that here are the some of the items that contribute to the changes in the budget. The general revenue change is mostly adding back funding that was one-time CRF money. There's also the governor proposes to start the training academy for the 58th training academy in September 2021. The budget funds 28 recruits, 3 of which would be funded from the new proposal for adult use marijuana. As you know, you'll be hearing as a full committee Article 11 on Thursday, And some of the revenue from that proposal is being dedicated to some staff here in DPS. The rest of the salaries and benefits include, again, turnover savings, adjustments to overtime, and as of April 10th, there are 11 vacancies. There are also mandatory retirement requirements, and we try to update you every year on how many people that affects for the state police, and there's 2 members who are mandated to retire in the current year and 17 in fiscal 2022. I mentioned before about the forfeiture funds available from the Department of Justice Task Force, and much of those funds went to the state police as well. I mentioned the $60 million for the Attorney General, but $45 million went to the state police. And we've updated this slide we've shown you in the past on where all the money went. I'll just note that the final column, fiscal 2022, actually is mostly other forfeiture funds because all of those Google funds have been committed. So now the departments, this shows some of their other forfeiture funds as being available for what's now been used a lot for training and technology and equipment. A brief discussion on vehicle purchases. As you know, that we have a state fleet revolving fund where the state created a way for state agencies to spread the cost of their vehicle purchases over a few years by making purchases out of the fund and then billing the agencies back over a 3-year period for some budget stability on those purchases. The governor's budget actually has purchases from a number of sources here. 223 vehicles over time from three different sources, 5.1 million state fleet revolving funds, 7.2 million from Rhode Island Capital Plan funds, and the prior year spend on Google forfeiture funds. I would just note, as I did in a prior presentation, using RICAP funds to buy cars is not a typical use for these funds. These are usually limited to capital projects. And speaking of capital projects, here are a summary. Here you have a summary of all the projects either requested or ongoing for the Department of Public Safety. Many of them are minor asset protection projects. Focus on a couple of new items. One is the replacement of the microwave system. This had been requested in prior years. It is now included in the governor's budget, with some funding annually to do this over time. This is going through RICAP with the expectation the equipment would last up to 15 years. There was a master plan funded in prior years with some findings about the state police facilities, which has led to a couple of other recommendations. One includes the administrative support building renovation, again, previously in other requests and not funded. And the other one is one you heard about last session, and that is to do a southern barracks for the state police. In the prior year's budget, there was a proposal to borrow money through the issuance of certificates of participation to build this new facility. This assumed a fiscal 21 start. As you know, that was not adopted. The governor's capital budget 5-year plan assumes that $35 million in new GO bonds would actually go before the voters in November of 2022. So that would, the project would then not start until fiscal 23, so there's a 2-year lag from the prior proposal. We would just note that it doesn't update any of the costs from the prior year, though you would not be taking any action on this item until the next legislative session. I would presume that would have to be updated by that point. Okay, that concludes an overview of all the budgets before you this evening. We're happy to take any of your questions.
Do any of the members have questions for Sharon at the moment? So Rep. Diaz has a question.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Chairman. Sharon, I go to ask question from Department of Public Safety, and it's a slide 20. It's 20? I believe it's 20. The sheriff. Okay. I noticed that at least one, which is that slide, is the only one includes CRF federal funding FY 2021. And as I learned before, we're not trying to balance or supporting any expenditure from CRF funds. Most of the time, what I mean is nothing permanent, because it's only funding coming from the federal government for emergency situation. So is any possibility for me understand the percentage of from CRF to FY 2022 based on salaries and benefit that is in that slide?
Sure. If you go back to slide 8.
In the same.
You're in the copy you have. I've got it on my screen. You can see that the CRF funds for the sheriffs in 21 is 15.1 million, but that's only 25% of all the DPS funds used, right? So there's 60 million total used across the department. And you're right, these are one-time funds. They are not used in the fiscal 22 budget. So the governor's budget, they're not available to use, but the governor's budget includes general revenues for that. That footnote was simply there because typically when you see sheriffs, they're always 100% general revenue funded, where the other divisions tend to have other grants or other ways to so it's not, sorry if it confused you, but they all have some CRF money on them as shown on this slide. That's slide 8.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have another question, and it's in the same presentation. It's like, I'm blind today. I believe it's 35. It's about state police.
Okay.
My question is, when I'm adding 2 members and 17 members, total 19 members that they are mandated to retire, those funding will be reflecting only in the 2022, right?
Right, so we put that information there for you to know that even though there's a class being added of 28 troopers, you have 19 people that are going to vacate spots. So the budget is only funding, who can actually be working.
Only up to the FY 2021, right?
Well, so 2021 is the current year, and
Yes.
all people are budgeted, and there is some turnover. That could be folks who are retiring. It could be people who leave non-trooper positions. But fiscal 22, as you bring on new members of the class, there are absolutely 17 sworn members who will have to retire at some point during that year. So it's really just to show you that as you bring on new people, there are some who are absolutely going to be vacated. Sometimes there's a question of why are you adding 10, 20, 30 if you don't know how many are leaving? And when you have a mandatory deadline, you know that at least 17 will leave because they have to.
Thank you. And I was reading, Mr. Chairman, one more.
Please go ahead.
I was reading in somewhere, because it's 4 presentations, and got my attention that we paying sheriff for out-of-state transportation. I can't find the one. Maybe if I have a little bit of time, I'm able to find it, but I was reading that we have funding or allocation for transportation for sheriff out of the state.
Yeah, if you look on slide 19 of the one you're in right now.
Okay.
I think what we simply summarized for you is that among the duties of the sheriffs is to guard out-of-state prisoners,
Okay, you got
and they
it.
also do transport. It's one of their main functions.
But I don't understand. It's just for me to understand the process. Why we paying out of the state? Like, is we when we moving an inmate to another facility out of the state? That is the reason why.
So sometimes, I'll ask for a clarification from the department, but prisoners transport from, say, the ACI to the courts. That's a main function. There are sometimes somebody is maybe in a hospital outside the state. Sometimes people are being extradited from another
Okay.
place. So these are not like, for the out-of-state things, those are not common functions, but it's just one of the duties.
Okay, I will hold other questions for the department director. So thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question for Sharon? Hearing none. Thank you again, Sharon, for an excellent presentation, as always. I guess we will bring on the administration next. And I would preface by saying, if you hear something from some questions that were answered, then you could begin your statement by answering some of those questions, or going through your statement and then follow up by answering some of those questions. Would appreciate it. So if I'm looking at this representative from the different agencies, I think the Attorney General might be on. And if he's on, he should come on.
I am on, Mr. Chair, so thank you very, very much, and all the members of the committee. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you about the work of the office, answer any questions that you may have. With me is Kerry Baker, our CFO, and will assist to the extent there are deeply numbers-driven questions. You know, Kerry is in a perfect position to help me help answer them. I want to start by saying that I believe that the office has really hit its stride and is doing terrific work. The office worked really hard through COVID, continued with its mission. Some of that mission was on the ground, and we paid a price in terms of quarantine and infection. But we continue to do the work and have served, I believe, the people of the state well. We've also served, I believe, state government well, both Governor Raimondo when she was here, and I believe that will continue, obviously, to happen with Governor McKee. When Governor Raimondo had questions during COVID about the scope of her legal authority, about how to implement her legal authority, she came to us, and I believe that we discharged those duties well as well. You know, I won't get into sort of all the various subject areas. Ms. Rowland covered that, really well. But I look at the work of the office as really, in principle, really twofold. We have the criminal division, which everyone associates with the office, and we all know what that means. That is handling cases involving public safety and hopefully doing them in a way that is fair and reasonable. But the other part of the mission of the office, I think, does not get enough attention, and where the work in particular is growing exponentially is on the civil side of the office. Some of that involves defending the state, not only defending the state when it gets sued in a tort action where someone, say, is injured by an agency of the government, but also defending the state in constitutional matters that matter very deeply to the governor and the General Assembly. When I say that, I'm thinking of things like truck tolling and sports betting, online gambling, and continuing contracts, for example. Now, those are not policy choices that I, as Attorney General, make. But in my capacity as a lawyer for the state, when the legislature has spoken and the governor has also spoken, then it's my job to defend the state. And that work is again expanding and continuing. There's another critical component, though, I think, of our civil division, and that is advocating on behalf of the people of the state. Now, that's work that, unfortunately in the past, I think has sometimes been not as much of a priority as it should be. But the reality is particularly today, that the public looks to me and this office to advocate on their behalf around environmental protection, around consumer protection, around insurance rates, and in particular around healthcare. And it is critically important that we have the resources necessary to meet those needs. You don't have to be, You don't have to be paying too close attention to know that we have been called on repeatedly by the public and the General Assembly to look into things that are of great concern to government and the people. I'm thinking of things like Eleanor Slater Hospital. I'm thinking of things like the proposed merger between Lifespan and Care New England. I'm thinking of things like a proposed change in effective control involving Roger Williams Hospital and Our Lady of Fatima Hospital. You know, I have presently assigned to healthcare by statute one person, and yet I've now taken 3 additional people and assigned them to healthcare simply to meet that growing need. The reality is that the state needs an effective regulator to really hold entities that would change the way they're going to do business in the state, in healthcare in particular, to account to make sure that they're doing things the right way. I want to go back briefly and just touch on some of the challenges, facing the office and why our requests are what they are, and why the governor has made the recommendation that he has. The reality is that in the criminal division, we are carrying caseloads that are far too high. When I was a young prosecutor in this office in the late 1990s or into early 2000s, there wasn't a prosecutor in this office that wasn't handling drug trafficking cases where your case count exceeded 100. Today, those prosecutors that are handling drug trafficking cases, I'm not talking about drug possession cases, those are going universally to our diversion court, which has been just a great step forward in criminal justice. Serious traffickers of narcotics and serious gun offenders are being prosecuted by that unit, and they're all carrying nearly 250 cases each. Lawyers in our special victims unit, which is handling felony cases involving child molestation or sexual assault or felony domestic assaults, their average caseloads are 167 cases each. Those caseloads are just not sustainable in the long run to achieve justice on behalf of victims and, frankly, on behalf of defendants to move the case as quickly and expeditiously as possible. I also don't want to neglect our district court unit. One of the slides indicated that we handle misdemeanor appeals. Now, I would submit that we handle many, many more cases than that. We not only prosecute cases, misdemeanor cases where the arrest is made by the state police, but also any misdemeanor where the person is on probation. So anytime somebody commits a misdemeanor and is already on probation, and unfortunately that's a lot of people, we're handling those cases. And we handled 4,000 such cases in 2020 during COVID, up nearly 1,000 from the year before. I have 4 lawyers doing that work exclusively. It's not a mission I have to take on, but it's a mission that I've agreed to take on as I'm balancing where to assign my resources as between, say, the special victims unit, which is dealing with felony child molestations and felony sexual assaults, and felony domestic violence charges. I've really got to think about whether I'm deploying my assets, in the right way. I want to get back to the civil division briefly. We have 30 lawyers in that division. I talked a little bit about the constitutional work. I want to talk a little bit about defending the state, tort actions against the state. We're now defending the state in 573 cases, where the exposure to the state is $67.7 million. That's a lot of money that's on the table if we don't do those cases well. I talked a little bit about healthcare. We really need to step up our environmental protection game in the state of Rhode Island, and I'm convinced that my office is the only one that can do that. And I think if you've been following our work, as I know that you have, I think we have achieved great results there about going after polluters, making sure that our agencies are taking the right steps to preserve transparency and reliable results, and ensuring public access. And our consumer protection function has never been stronger. And yet there are areas that are clearly neglected. Public utilities is one of them. We have just not been able to expand our mission to do the kind of work in the context of public utilities that we need to do to protect consumers. If you get a bill from your telephone company or your cable service provider and you don't understand it, as I don't, frankly, then clearly we have work to do to try to make that conduct more transparent. Again, you don't have to be too far away from the news to understand how much work needs to be done in that space. And so I'll get to the ask. The governor's recommended 4 FTEs. I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful for this committee's consideration of that request. I would submit that the requested 8 FTEs is absolutely necessary for us to complete our mission in an effective way. You know, on the criminal side, those lawyers will go to that special victims unit, which needs them so badly, and to support our diversion court, where 25% of our now felony filings are ending up. That's a great step forward, brought forward by this General Assembly to make that make the criminal justice system more fair and more appropriate. But I need someone to help cover that work. On the civil side, I've asked for 4 FTEs to handle more complex litigation. And that's really important for 2 reasons. Number one, we can do a lot more on behalf of the people of the state, and that is the means by which these positions will pay for themselves. We've talked with the House staff about that, talked to the governor's staff about that. We bring in millions of dollars on behalf of the state every year. If we can take a greater role in the work that we do with other attorneys general around the country, we can significantly increase the amount of dollars that come back to the state of Rhode Island. The kind of role that we play in the litigation that's done nationally, whether that involves Wells Fargo or Volkswagen or some other instances, and I could go on and on, the larger role that we play, the more money we can bring back to the state and the more money we can use to pay for these resources. So I view these resources as an investment that will, and we can demonstrate it, will pay for themselves. And so that I think summarizes, the points that I wanted to make to the committee. You know, I'm incredibly proud of the work that we're doing. You know, in the context of criminal justice reform, we have taken on new responsibilities. We are now reviewing every single instance of misdemeanor allegations of excessive force by police. That's something this office had never done before. Our diversion court, as I mentioned, in Superior Court is handling 25% of our case files. And the expungement clinics that we've run, both in person pre-COVID and now online, have helped over 600 people determine whether or not they are eligible for expungement, and where they are, made sure they can make that happen by helping them fill out the paperwork and getting the ball over the finish line. So I'm incredibly proud of the work that the office is doing. I think we can do even more on behalf of the state, on behalf of the people of the state of Rhode Island. I will tell you that in the context of a recent case, which I know is of great concern to both the House and the Senate, when it was clear that we had to get involved, we sat around a table in my office and we asked ourselves the question, who is going to do it? And that's not a place that I ever want to be when my job is to be the people's lawyer. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, and I'm incredibly grateful for your time.
Thank you, General. Rep. Diaz, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you so much, Attorney Nerona. I am particularly very grateful for so many great things that you do through your office, especially bring hope to many families that went through a lot and they have a pending criminal record that due to your office they able to expunge. So thank you for that and so many other things. But you know, the job here in Finance Committee is to read, analyze, and try to understand the way departments are spending state funding. And it's not criticized in any purpose, but I just looking to understand something. As Rhode Island went through the coronavirus crisis, the unemployment rate increased. Many people are facing the difficult time to they change their life and looking for new way to bring income to the family. So many people are unemployed. In the presentation that Sharon did today, I noticed that the department have increased $2.2 million for BCI and by division in your office. The reason I a little confused is as Rhode Island facing unemployment rate so high, I like to understand what other workers and top of health workers are seeking for BCI services from your department. Why we have unemployment rate so high and we need more BCI? That is the little part I wanted you clarify for me, please. And again, it's
Sure.
no any criticize. I'm so happy with your office, but I'm trying to understand the dynamic behind this.
Yeah, thank you, Representative, and thank you for your question. You know, one of the principal things that I've endeavored to do is to make sure that for state background checks, that we do not increase the cost on individuals that need those state background checks. There are essentially two kinds of background checks. For certain occupations, you need a federal national background check, which requires fingerprints. That fee is set by the FBI, and so we have to charge that fee. Where we have discretion is on the state background check, which does not require a fingerprint analysis. And I have resisted every year as Attorney General raising that fee. I believe it's $5, and I have resisted every year raising that fee. You know, it is a fee which covers our expenses. And we waive it for individuals who can't afford it. There are instances where we do waive that fee. But we have deliberately kept that fee very modest, and I have resisted efforts to raise that fee for that very reason. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, however, just tell me how it doesn't, and I'm happy to try again or call on Kerry to try to assist.
Thank you so much, but I was looking more to try to figure it out what type of workers in the state of Rhode Island seeking for BCI more than others in this process of recovering.
I see. So how many people? So who's trying to get a background check under these circumstances? So, you know, it has been because of COVID. You know, my ability to have a footprint in that building has been somewhat less. I will tell you that pre-COVID. I might just ask Kerry to mute. I think she's coming through here. You know, pre-COVID, I would pretty regularly go down to BCI and stand in line and ask people why they were there for two reasons. I wanted to know, and also to convey to my team how important it was that we do customer service really, really well. My overall impression, and we can certainly get back to the committee and to determine, you know, what occupations are principally seeking background checks. It's to my memory, it is largely healthcare workers, and in some instances volunteers. Now, obviously, the ability to volunteer in COVID as I'm sure, has gone down. But if I had to target something off the top of my head, Representative Diaz, I would say that they are healthcare workers. But we can certainly break down those 52,000 background checks that we did last year and provide to you and the committee the occupations of the individuals who sought those background checks. You know, the reality is that, you know, today, many more people need a background check than did, you know, 20 years ago. And as a result, you know, we're doing on average 350 window transactions a day.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Now, I think I have a couple of questions, General. So you were stating that your office, you know, the state could potentially stand to gain some $67 million in class action suit that you're representing the state. So where would the bulk of that money go?
Right. So I want to clarify what I said, Mr. Chair. What I was saying there was that the state is exposed to $67 million in lawsuits where we're defending the state. Our exposure is $67 million. So if we don't do a good job defending those cases, the state is on the hook for up to $67 million plus 12% interest. So the point I was trying to make there is that when we're handling those 573 cases, where we're defending the state, not suing on behalf of the state, but defending the state when it gets sued, there is a lot of money at stake, and a lot of my personnel is devoted to doing that work, which obviously limits our ability to get on offense around the things that people care about: healthcare, environmental protection, consumer protection. Where we can recover money on behalf of the state is by suing on behalf of the state, either individually or along with our fellow attorneys general, and that's something we believe can easily cover the FTEs that we're asking for in this budget. Now, again, my staff can come back with projections. I believe that they may have submitted them to the fiscal staff. I believe they did to the governor already, and did with Governor Raimondo. But we anticipate this year recovering roughly $3.5 million alone. And so the reality is that this office can pretty much count on recovering multiple millions of dollars on behalf of the state every year, most of which will be returned to the General Assembly, as it has in the first year of my term. to do just that. I believe $6 million was brought back to the General Assembly in year one to help, fill a state budget hole. What I don't do is allocate money as has been done in the past. So there was a reference to the Volkswagen money. That money was not distributed on my watch. That was done before I got here. I mean, I don't believe it to be my role to take money that we recover on behalf of the state and disperse it. I believe that's the General Assembly's job. It's my money. It's my job to recover the money, cover my expenses, cover my costs, allow me to bring additional actions, but return the bulk of the money to the General Assembly to do with it what they see fit.
Thank you very much. I misunderstood your comments earlier, so I apologize for that. But thank you very much for the job that you do in that office. So I'll have a follow-up question with regards to decriminalizing some of the misdemeanor charges, which may help in the backlog in the state.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, if I could, where we see the enormous volume is in the Superior Court, and those are felony cases. So that's where, frankly, our backlog exists. Now, some of that backlog is of our own making. When I took office on January 1st of 2019, there were about roughly 1,600 cases that were somewhat languishing in the system. We got all those cases charged by the middle of 2019. It's sort of like if you can imagine a snake with something right in the middle of it, hasn't fully digested the bubble yet. That's kind of where we are. My hope is that will smooth out in time, but that's not, misdemeanors are not really our resource problem on the criminal side. Our problem on the criminal side are felony cases that are very serious. We're handling a lot of misdemeanor cases because, unfortunately, there's a lot of misdemeanants that are also violators. We're handling, as I said, 4,000 of them in 2020, 3,000 in 2019. But where we really have a resource challenge right now is in the Superior Court, where we're handling very, very serious cases with very large caseloads.
Thank you, General, and again, thank you for a wonderful presentation, and thank you for the work that you do at the AG's office.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any more questions? So I think now I think Colonel Manning might be on. So if he's on, Colonel, could you come on? And if you did hear some of the concern that some of our members here have, maybe you could address those after your comment.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to testify my budget today. And thank you to the committee. This is the third time that I'll be going before you since coming back. My official role as the superintendent of the state police. I will keep this presentation short, as I know your time is very valuable and you have a long night ahead of you. These are unprecedented times for any law enforcement agency across the United States. Rhode Island State Police and the Department of Public Safety has provided tremendous support to the citizens of the state every day, no matter the event or circumstances. And I'm extremely proud of the men and women of the state police and DPS as a whole. We've been operating for many, many years under this mantra: we do more with less. More than any time in our history, the state police and public safety has been asked to do more with less. Not typical duties and responsibilities of law enforcement. Quite honestly, we will do anything to assist our citizens and keep the state safe. Over the past 30 years, the responsibilities of the state police have grown dramatically to respond to the needs of the state, but budgetarily, we have never been able to significantly increase the workforce. Right now, in 2021, we have 242 troopers, sworn members of the state police, which is the exact number we had 10 years ago in 2011. We've gone a little above that number, but mostly below, as mandatory retirements have taken its toll on the agency. Looking at the state police, some of the areas that we've greatly expanded in the past year is the public order platoon, in response and in training, to keep the state safe during the most volatile times I've seen in my law enforcement career. The Financial Crimes Unit has been tasked and responded to over 87,000 victims of DLT fraud, which we've seen in the news lately. Last month, in March, I created the Special Victims Unit on the state police,
Go to them, yeah?
which was created to respond to a significant increase in sexual assault cases. So far in 2021, the Detective Bureau has fielded more than 300 sexual assault complaints. In the past, the Major Crimes Unit handled these type of investigations, but we really needed subject matter experts to handle these increasing number that come in every day. We are committed to investigating and providing the victim of every case the attention they deserve. The Capitol Police and the Rhode Island Sheriffs, they stepped up tremendously in the past year. They were called upon to assist with the health screening during COVID at all Rhode Island state buildings. They processed many COVID positive screened patients statewide for all 39 cities and towns when prisoners were arrested and brought to the intake center. The security of state buildings during civil unrest, the Capitol Police and Sheriffs stood by at every entrance and exit, keeping our buildings safe on Capitol Hill. E911, they've implemented security, storage, and switch upgrades to ensure the emergency medical dispatch could be implemented in June as training concludes in the next few weeks. The Municipal Training Academy. When COVID was at its height, we had tremendous challenges with keeping all municipal police recruits in the academy and graduating on time. They did an excellent job of completing that mission. The state police is on the verge of a personnel crisis between retirements and turnover. I cannot sugarcoat this. Quite honestly, we're busting at the seams. By November 2022, the state police will lose 19 sworn members to mandatory retirement. We have many others that are leaving the state police for the FBI, the DEA, resigning, or for the Massachusetts State Police. The Massachusetts State Police are recruiting right now. And I'm not proud to say that approximately 20 of the members of the Rhode Island State Police have applied to that agency. Simply, we cannot compete with pay, benefits, and pension as we have in past years. You watch the news every night and you see that law enforcement is faced with a crisis all across the United States. And we face those same crises and challenges with recruitment and retention. The proposed 28-person recruit class is a good start, and we're very appreciative to the governor and you to assist us in getting that class through to the level included in the governor's budget as proposed. And we remain committed to continuous recruitment and hiring. I will give you some statistics for you to look at to show you when I make that statement, we do more with less. The Rhode Island State Police has 242 members right now for approximately 1 million people in our population. At full complement, the Massachusetts State Police will have 2,700 troopers, which equates to 385 troopers per 1 million of their residents. The Connecticut State Police, at full complement, will have 325 sworn members per 1 million of their residents. Connecticut State Police is expected to grow to 1,300 to 1,500 troopers. The Delaware State Police, which is probably one of the states we can draw a most comparison. It's a small state with approximately 950,000 people as the state of Rhode Island, has 725 troopers per 1 million sworn. We are also having similar recruitment and retention difficulties that are occurring at the sheriffs and Capitol Police. The new classes may be necessary for each unit in 2022. The state police is committed to meet the $300,000 reduction in overtime in this budget. Through proper management of each overtime assignment, every hour of overtime is scrutinized. And I mean that, through me. Every hour, every week, we check and make sure that every overtime hour that is expended is absolutely needed. Every trooper that resigns or retires leaves a gap on the state police. That estimate is $120,000 annually in overtime for each position that we are short. And as I stated before, we are at the breaking point now, where every person that leaves us creates a gap. Despite the increased number of sworn number vacancies in fiscal year 2021, the overtime has remained relatively flat compared to 2020. Commitment of mine to manage a responsible budget. What are my priorities? Personnel. I'm committed to recruiting, hiring, and retaining the most diverse professional state police troopers and public safety personnel. As I stated before, the national trends with recruitment indicate that it'll be more difficult to maintain competitiveness and attract qualified candidates, harder than ever. The Rhode Island State Police started recruiting in April 1st this year. Currently, we have approximately 380 applicants. We normally would expect approximately 2,000 applicants in the same time frame. We are recruiting for one more month. In that month period, we're hoping to get to 1,000. That's a lofty goal. So we would get normally 3,500 to 4,000 applicants every time we ran a recruit process for the Rhode Island State Police. I don't think we're going to get anywhere near that. But once again, it's just not Rhode Island, it's national. My counterparts in Massachusetts, another great agency, and I'm very close with Colonel Mason, who's the superintendent of the Mass State Police. Their application process is down by 2/3. The most applicants they ever got was 28,000 to become Massachusetts State Troopers. This year, at their recruitment process, they have 6,500 applicants. Another priority, infrastructure and equipment. The Southern Barracks, which I've been talking about since I came on 26 months ago. In fiscal year 22-26 capital budget, it includes a general obligation bond for the construction of a Southern Barracks at a cost of $35 million. As I've shown you in slides before this, that the Hope Valley and Wickford Barracks are in deplorable condition, were built in 1930 and have never been renovated. The Portsmouth Barracks, which is not in the budget, my plan there is to do a basic refurbishing of that barracks to get a foothold back in the East Bay. Also, the Portsmouth Barracks has been closed for 8 years. We're estimating it would cost about $2 million, of which is funding that we're looking closely to find to refurbish that barracks in the event I have to close Hope Valley or Wickford. Also, there's a cell tower there that's critical infrastructure that must stay in state police and the state of Rhode Island control. We're very hopeful that in the CARES Act money, that we would, if there is funding available, that we would get careful consideration for this. And I'm asking respectfully to look closely at this if it comes across your desk. One of the most important infrastructure and equipment, I'd say equipment, initiatives we have is body-worn cameras. There are 49 state police agencies across the United States. The only agency that does not have, the only state that does not have a state police agency is Hawaii. They have a Bureau of Investigation, not a state police or a highway patrol. Of the 49 state police agencies, there are only 3 with no camera systems, whether in car or body worn. That's Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and New York. New Hampshire and New York are currently under contract to start equipping their state police troopers with body-worn cameras. One of the first initiatives that I had when I came back to the state police on March 1st, 2019, was body-worn cameras. Recently, in December of 2020, the state police completed a pilot program in studying body-worn cameras and in-car camera systems to see which system would benefit us the most. And we have narrowed it down to one camera system. And we're ready to implement these camera systems to improve transparency and accountability. We've been working very closely with the Rhode Island Attorney General on this, as I know it is a priority for Attorney General Nerona and myself. If you watch the news on any given night, you can see the importance of body-worn cameras in any police department. And while funding is not included in this governor's budget, I'm providing this information to you so that you can give careful consideration if CARES funding were to be available. The total cost we estimate is $2.8 million, which would include the body-worn cameras, a part-time position of a legal counsel for all the APRA requests, other legal experts to assist with that, and also an IT expert for the cloud storage. Let's talk about state police vehicles. I know we've included in our capital budget, and I think it is appropriately placed there. 65% of the fleet is more than 5 years old and over 100,000 miles. The governor's budget assumes 30 vehicles per year for the state police and 35 sheriff's vehicles over the next 5-year capital plan. E911, the technology investments, aerial overhead pictometry upgrade, $158,000 a year, and the conversion of copper lines projected at $543,000 to commence in fiscal year 2022 and $100,000 annually to maintain them. In conclusion, I'm extremely proud to be in this great profession and lead this tremendous law enforcement agency. The citizens of the state should be very thankful and proud of the men and women of the state police and DPS as a whole for what they have shown over the past year in keeping this state safe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and if you have any specific questions that you would like me to answer, I know Representative Diaz asked a question I can answer as well, if you'd like.
Go ahead, Colonel.
The question came up regarding transportation costs for the sheriffs. That fee is for it's for out-of-state transportation of prisoners coming into the state that were wanted in this state of Rhode Island. I'm sorry, there was one other question that I can't quite remember. I was trying to take notes, and if you could refresh my memory, I would gladly answer that question.
Thank you, Coroner. I'm so pleased to having you in front of us tonight. The question was answered by Sharon and was in relation of the numbers of the state police officers that are retiring and how those salary we're reflecting on FY 2022, and she explained it very well, so don't worry. But before I move and I leave the meeting tonight, I just wanted to thank you for the work done by you as a leader, as a chief command of the state police and every single officers. And I want to please you to utilize the resources from community of color in terms to inform, sharing the process of the State Police Academy. We need to reflecting the population of the state into the state police. So I please you, and please I offer my time to helping you to share the information so you can have more candidates for the State Police Academy. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes. Representative Tobon has a question. Colonel.
Thank you, Chair. And Colonel, again, thank you. And I'm sure that not just Representative Diaz, but all of us who can be of help to you as you look to find the best talent in our state and beyond to make sure that we could fill those positions that are that you're looking to fill currently and future ones. With that said, I'm concerned and as to those numbers that you just told us, and as you mentioned, it's a nationwide situation as to the drop in interest into the state police. I think we've always prided ourselves that Rhode Island has always stood out amongst all the agencies around the country, and the fact that so many have gone over just over the border to Massachusetts. What are we? Those who've gone over the border, how far into their time with the Rhode Island State Police were they roughly? And how many were there?
Mr. Representative, those are great questions. And once again, I can't sugarcoat this. The state police is Rhode Island State Police is a great organization. And when I came on, we always drew from other agencies because of the benefit package and the infrastructure and so forth that we had that other agencies did not. I'm not pointing fingers. There's no fault to be placed other than that, once again, they're leaving for pay, benefits, and pension that we can't compete at that level. The time frame that we are losing troopers is in the, I would say, in the 1 to 3 year time frame. That they come here, they get some experience, and they look elsewhere. And the first question that might come to your mind is, well, are these Massachusetts residents that are coming here, and are they trying to get back to Massachusetts after using Rhode Island as a springboard? The answer is sometimes, but there really cannot be a direct correlation to that. It's just that Massachusetts, like Rhode Island, is a premier agency. Massachusetts State Police can retire at 75% in their pension at 30 years. The Rhode Island State Police, a new trooper coming on, goes 33 years at 65% of his pay, and the pay is substantially higher, 25% to 30% higher in the state of Massachusetts. That's just an example.
So, Colonel, if you could just give me a little more detail as to that, and again, this is something we're going to face for a long time. Well, hopefully not a long time, but at least in the foreseeable future. What's our starting trooper? What are they starting at roughly?
Starting salary for a trooper is approximately $68,000, which is it's a good salary. But once again, we're competing with a state much wealthier than ours, just to our north.
Okay, and then the other part is that, you know, it's something that pains me because I think that public service, none of us get into it to get rich, or we want to live comfortably, or at least, well, not us. We can't live comfortably on $16,000, but at least the professionals who are out there every day. What do you think is something that would make sense for us financially if we could find a number that we probably can't compare directly to Massachusetts or Connecticut, but what's a number that could retain somebody? Because it just pains me to think this is just about money. And yes, I mean, that 65, that 10% difference after 30 years, or plus that 3 additional years that we add on, again, it's going to compromise a lot of quality long term. So what do you have something that you can share with us that I'm sure that you must scratch your head a lot thinking about this and figuring out how we can stop that?
Well, you can see I scratch my head a lot, Mr. Representative. There's not much left on top.
I'm with you.
I don't want to make it sound like Rhode Island troopers are greedy and it's just about the money. It's not. That just draws a comparison. I went to the union and I have a great relationship with the union leadership and membership on the state police because I was a union member for 18 years. When I was coming up through the ranks, I have a tremendous amount of respect for this union. This isn't really just about money. I think that's the least of the 3 elements we're talking about. One of the major elements is something I addressed. And once again, sir, I can't sugarcoat this. The barracks that we work in are deplorable. They're an embarrassment to a professional law enforcement agency. That's our fault. That's on our shoulders. I'm not putting blame on anyone else. And I would not be asking for help if we didn't need it. I was at the gas pumps 2 months ago talking to a very well-respected corporal on the state police, a young trooper that I have tremendous respect for. And I asked him, what bothers you? What do you think are one of the issues we have here? And these are his exact words to me. He said, Colonel, the barracks are so bad, it's depressing. I don't even like to step foot in them. And I've heard that from many troopers. But once again, this didn't happen overnight. The responsibility is ours. We own this. So I think if you look at the total recruitment and retention program, we need to have better facilities. We need to, once again, take care of our troopers, which we do. But that is one area that we're asking for. With the equipment, the body-worn cameras, we need those. One of the biggest fears I have most recently is one of our troopers get involved in an incident and not having the camera to support what they're stating occurred. So I appreciate your concern. I appreciate you. And this committee and House Finance as a whole has helped us tremendously in the past 3 years that I've been here. And I appreciate your kind words.
Colonel, thank you so much. Yeah, definitely the morale goes a long way in regards to that. I think it's similar to what we're trying to do with with education and enhancing the facilities that are so old, and to make sure that the morale of the teachers and the excitement of the students, and it goes across all agencies. So again, thank you for what you do with, the finite resources that we're able to provide year after year. And this is something that obviously this committee takes very serious. I recently took a class with some of your members. I'm proud of the product that we have in Rhode Island, and outstanding individuals that I got to take that class with. So thanks again, and I look forward to working closely with you to support
sir.
to support you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Tavon. So, does anybody else have any questions? Colin, I have a couple of questions. So, under your command now, how many of those 242 members that make up the complement of the force are from Rhode Island?
I don't have that exact number, sir. I can get that for you, but the vast majority are from Rhode Island. There's a small percentage that mostly, a couple, I don't have the exact numbers, but the vast majority are from Rhode Island. But they all live in the state. I will tell you that. They reside in the state of Rhode Island.
Yeah, because I do have a little bit of a pet peeve, because I think we're always going out and getting folks from other states, and then, as you said, they use us as a stepping stone and they move on to other places. So that's if that's something that you could look into, I would greatly appreciate. Now, one of the things that for me that is the biggest part of your job, that I think the most important part of your job, I think, from my perspective, sir, is the Municipal Training Academy, because that's where the rubber meets the road for me. And as you've indicated, when we look across the state, all these issues that are coming up are coming from the municipality and those folks, the way they were trained. So can you give me any indication as to what are you doing to perhaps change the training system in the municipal academy to prevent some of the similar things that we're seeing in the news?
Once again, sir, that's a great question. And every day, especially over the past year and change, I've met with the director of training, and we've gone over our training program at the municipal academy. We have a very good training program. It pretty much mirrors all the essentials that are needed in the State Police Academy, in our academy, and also the Province Police Academy. But we're always looking for innovative ways to further train our recruits and to handle these very delicate situations that they're being placed into. For example, one of the areas that we are looking at, just yesterday I met with the director of training, who's a captain on the State Police, and we started talking about peer accountability training. We've all seen in the Minneapolis videos of several police officers standing watching while one of their police officers murdered someone. And that bothered me as much as the crime itself, that no one intervened. Do we have that problem in Rhode Island? I don't think we do. But we're going to make sure that we train our officers that we never have that problem. So those are some of the innovative ways that we're looking at to evolve into the best trained law enforcement officers in the country. And I firmly believe this. The cadre of police officers in this state, and there are about 2,500 depending how you count them, are some of the best trained, motivated, honest, good, hardworking people I've ever encountered in my law enforcement career.
Well, I think the problem that I have is the use of force, and how it is disproportionately used on people of color. What is actually being done in that respect?
Sir, I share that same concern with you, looking at the trend going across the United States. Long before the incidents that took place in the past year across the United States, we've been training our police officers and troopers in bias-based policing, de-escalation tactics, on and on. And once again, though, our training needs to evolve with the current task that we are faced with. So am I concerned looking at the national trend of how this says, what is going on? I do. Am I confident that we can, through an evolving training in the state of Rhode Island, that we can continually train them on de-escalation? I do. So that is something that's definitely a top priority to us.
Now, in terms of community-based policing, I mean, are we going back to that at some point? I mean, I know that people talk about community policing a lot, but I don't see that happening.
Mr. Barros, we never left community policing. I think that has come a long way in the past 10 years. For example, just last year, we created on the state police a community equity diversity unit, where there's a captain, a person of color that came from a pretty tough background from the state of Tennessee, who knows how to relate to people of color in our communities. He's working very closely in that unit, not only to recruit, but to connect to the communities we serve. I know other police departments across the state have tremendous resources going into that same type of initiative. But once again, there are checks and balances in law enforcement in the state of Rhode Island that we have. We have mandatory reporting to ensure that there are no police officers or troopers that are targeting people of color in the state. We have, for example, on the state police, we put a survey out where people who we interact with, whether it's a motor vehicle violation or an arrest, can tell us the instances and what type of, how they were treated on the road when they were stopped or anything, or an incident, an accident, anything. We're not perfect, but we are continually working to make this a better system.
And I certainly appreciate that, but I think I'll go back to my original premise that, proper training, respect for the individual. I mean, I think the fact that, they're there to do a public service, they ought to show, I mean, I'm not saying that, which I'm very happy to say, that I'm glad that we're not in the news, and I hope that we never get to, to be in the news for something like that. And I certainly applaud you and some of your members for maybe using the different tactic than some of these other states are using. So I'm gonna diverge for a minute because my colleague Tobon has a question, and I'll come back with a few other questions.
Yes, sir.
Colonel, in regards to recruiting, are you guys, how far is that span or that reach? Are you utilizing different radio, or what type of advertising are you utilizing within the minority community?
So that is something I address every day. And we had a very robust recruitment training period in the last class, for the 2019 class, that the graduating class was the most diverse class in the history of the state police. And I'm not taking credit for that. That was in place even before I got here. I will tell you, in speaking to my community equity diversity unit commander, there's a lot of mistrust among people of color to even apply for the state police. That concerns me. And that's something that we are trying to fix. And we need help from our community outreach leaders and our community partners. But we have 1 month left, and we are actively recruiting for a very diverse class at this time.
How long ago did you come to that conclusion that you were having that challenge? I mean, I think that moving forward every year, there's a good chance that every class will be the most diverse, outdoing the previous one. I'm thinking, right? But this is news to me. I mean, we're in the business, right? We're in this game along with you. And I had heard about recruiting, but I wasn't sure if it had started, and now it comes to my attention, it's actually ending. You're expanding it. And it's important that you utilize your resources, including us, that we should be individuals who can help spread that word and help lessen that mistrust, because hopefully people trust us. That's why we're here. And so I think that we could be of great help, but it would be important that maybe the individual, your commander, calls us in. I think there's not a lot of us. There's about 15, less than 20 of us here, at least between both chambers, who can help spread that word. Please, as Representative Diaz mentioned, we're here to help.
That's a great idea, and I appreciate the feedback on that. Even though we are struggling to get a diverse class this time, we're not giving up. We have until June 6th. And if need be, I will continue the recruitment.
Expand it again,
until we can get a desired number of applicants for this job. I assure you, either by the end of this week or next week, you will be getting a call from the captain running this unit, and we will take your recommendation very seriously, and I think it's a great idea. And any help we can get, we appreciate it.
Great. And then my last thing is on body cameras. I had a conversation with about 10 years ago when the whole body camera conversation was beginning, really, and it was at the state police level. And there was a concern at the time about getting body cameras for state police because, and correct me if I'm wrong, okay, but I think the concern was there was only a 180-foot view. It was a degree view versus a 360. And so they said that it would be unfair to the police, and again, don't quote my words, but it was something to the effect that there was going to be missing imagery that would not be supportive of the police. Now we're talking about we fell behind, and 10 years later we're having that conversation that we never even got there. Do you recall any of those conversations in your time back then? Or can you clarify for me? Just because, again, I don't want to be passing on misinformation, but I did have this conversation with somebody very high in the state police about 10 years ago.
So you have a good memory. When I was a patrol corporal and patrol sergeant, I wore an audio pack connected to my in-car dash camera in my marked state police cruiser. And I wore it for a period of about 6 years, but I think the whole entire program that we had went about 8 years. That was really at the inception of in-car cameras, and there was really no such thing as a body-worn camera back then. So one of the old arguments was that you're not getting the full picture, that you're only getting a piece of what really took place, a snapshot, and that you used the term 180 degrees. Well, I don't think you can get 360 degrees anywhere. But that is why the proposal the Rhode Island State Police has is, along with the other approximately 20 agencies, we'd have both. We'd have body-worn cameras on the troopers, and we would have in-car dash cameras mounted in the vehicles. Because the mission of the state police, we're constantly in and out of these vehicles, and we do not want to miss anything if an incident did occur. But that argument that whoever gave that to you is outdated. Technology has come so far that is not my concern at all. And even if it was a concern, that's not my greatest concern. That's on the low end of my priorities. The concern is not having anything documented in the event a trooper needs to tell their side of the story without a video to back it up.
Great. Well, again, thank you. My big concern is that's been 10 years and we don't have cameras. Do you have a price tag on what it would cost to outfit our, I don't know if that was mentioned, but
Yeah.
It was mentioned? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I must have missed it. But
I can go over that again, sir. So, so once again, the total amount that we would need for in-car and body-worn cameras, state-of-the-art, the best system available to us at this time, is $2.85 million. That includes the camera, body-worn camera, the in-car camera, a .6 position legal counsel, because this can be a tremendous amount of APRA requests, for a legal assistant to help with the APRA request, and for an IT person to help with all the data that needs to be saved in the cloud. Total cost is $2.85 million.
Colonel, and in regards to the maintenance, long-term maintenance, do you have to calibrate them? Does the cloud, all of those things, do you have a rough idea of what that would cost and in looking into the future?
Sir, that is a 5-year contract
Correct.
that we have for $2.85 million per year. So, it per year. And so that contract includes, the equipment, upkeep, cloud storage,
2.8
everything.
million.
Not just for that, but also
Yeah.
that 2.85 million includes the other positions we would need for IT and paralegals.
Ask him.
Colonel, just need to clarify something real quick. I lost you at one point. 2.8 million a year for 5 years, or 2.8 for 5 years? What was that number again?
So it's $2.5 million for the equipment up front
Okay.
for 5 years.
One time.
Oh, so it's a one-time 2.5.
It's a one-time cost of $2.5 million, but that's with a 5-year commitment. So it's not $2.5 million a year.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
Sorry if I confuse you.
Perfect. And then, and that would include all of the things that I asked in regards to the maintenance and warranties. And so is this a purchase or is this a lease?
I would say this Axon is a lease, so that at the end of 5 years, we would have to come up with additional money to upgrade the equipment.
Upgrade.
So once again, so there's no confusion, it's 2.5 million over 5 years, $350,000 total for the FTEs that would have to assist with this, for a total of 2.85 million over
Got it.
5 years.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Colonel, thanks again. All right, Chair.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Rep. Tobon. So, to sort of piggyback on what Rep. Tobon says, so my concern is not so much that, but that the proper training be given to those individuals wearing and having these cameras. So what would be the protocol for them having it on, and what would be the punishment when, and if not, those cameras are not on?
That's up to us.
Mr. Barros, in the pilot program, we did not give them as extensive training that will be given to them once they get these cameras. But one thing I will assure you, there will be strict policies. And if this camera needs to be on and it's off, there will be severe ramifications for the person that either did not turn it on or turned it off. But there will be a tremendous amount of training, of best practice training, consistent with the Mass State Police and the Connecticut State Police that already use body cameras.
Thank you. I'll come back with a couple more questions. Rep. Boginski has a question.
Hi, Colonel. Thanks for joining us this evening. A quick question about the body cameras. Do you expect that it would have any impact, this pilot program, on the collective bargaining agreement, or do you expect any pushback from the rank and file?
So that's another good question. If you had asked me this 2 years ago, I would say that, not that it would have an impact on the CBA, but there probably would have been some level of pushback because, quite honestly, and I wore a camera for many years, no one really wants to wear a camera every minute when you're working, but it's a fact of life. If you ask me now, right now, the vast majority of troopers want body cameras and know the need for it.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. And I'd also like to just reiterate the comments of my colleagues that we're all very impressed by you, and we're all very grateful to your dedication to the state and the fantastic organization that you lead.
Thank you very much, Ms. Representative.
So, Colonel, I'll just have, one issue that I did have with Sharon's presentation is the fact that you're using RICAP to buy the vehicles.
Yes, sir.
And so that should be something, need some proper budgeting process so that doesn't happen.
Yes, so we addressed that with my finance directors on as well. And I, in many respects, I agree with you. I mean, the definition of capital is past 5 years. But we've demonstrated that our vehicles are kept so long that we could also keep them in the capital plan. But If you have a specific question, Bernie Lane is on, who's the finance director for the Department of Public Safety. Would you like him to go further with that question, sir?
No, sir. I just have one last question, and that is in reference to the barracks. I mean, 2 years later, and it costs less. So what's the, I'm usually, things 2 years out cost more. So what's the, this is going to cost less? And how do you do that?
No, sir. I didn't think it would cost less. The general obligation bond would be for $35 million.
2 years
Once
later.
again, this is one of those areas where 2 years ago, when I first addressed this committee, we were ready to do it, and all of us, and COVID hit, and it really set us back quite a bit in our capital projects, personnel, and so forth. So we are putting a proposal forward to look at this as part of the infrastructure package money that came in through the CARES Act. So that is something we're looking at very closely with the governor.
No, I guess my question was, this won't take place until 2023, so it's 2 years later, and it's going to cost, I mean, the estimate is $43 million.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think the initial estimate was 43 million, but we have 35 million is what the true cost would be. That was the initial estimate, 43 million, but we scaled it back.
Okay. Thank you.
So, Mr. Lane, Bernie, would you like to clarify that?
Yes. Thank you, Colonel. The 40 million estimate that was provided by Sharon included the debt service cost on top of it. We are committed to sticking within the $35 million. We understand that there's inflationary cost, but the Colonel has maintained that we will build the barracks within the amount that the governor has proposed.
Okay, we'll see.
Mr. Barros, I'd like to leave you with this thought, because this is a very interesting conversation and it was much needed. We're going to share the study we did with our body-worn cameras with the General Assembly. So we will send that over to you so you can see for yourself what the results were of that and how beneficial that would be to the state police.
I can't even talk. Rep? Yeah.
Chairman, I just want to point out, unless I'm mistaken, I believe the last upgrade to a state police barracks, the project came in ahead of schedule and under budget.
There you go.
In Situate? Oh, maybe I'm mistaken, but.
No, that is also a good point. So there were 4 barracks built in 1930. Lincoln Barracks was first, Hope Valley Barracks was second, Wickford Barracks and the Portsmouth Barracks was finished in 1934. The Lincoln Barracks was renovated under Google funds at a cost of approximately $8 million. That was several years ago. And it did come in on time. I believe it came just under budget. The State Police Complex, the Public Safety Complex that I'm currently in right now, that I believe was in the 50-something million dollar range, and that was 10 years ago in 2010 when it was opened. And that came, I believe, on budget. I assure you, whatever amount of money that we get for a new barracks, if we're fortunate enough to get it, I will run that project like I run my own home, and I will make sure we spend the allotted amount of money, not a dollar more. I will get as close to that promise as I can.
Thank you, Colonel, for a lively discussion.
Thank you very much for your time, sir. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. I think now we probably should go to the judiciary. Is there somebody there?
Hi, Chair. It's Darlene Walsh, Director of Finance and Budget for the Judiciary.
Welcome.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring 2 things to your attention. We're just about done with our third quarter projections, and we are projecting a surplus. And the majority of that is in our indigent defense line item. This is the first year we've seen a decrease in this line item. I think that this is going to be a temporary decrease due to the current situation. and we will probably be requesting that that money be reappropriated in FY22. The other item that I wanted to bring to your attention is our district court has a bill in to create a mental health treatment calendar. It's House Bill 6025. This would create a calendar to, help individuals come into our judiciary with mental health issues. I think it's much needed. The chief thinks so too. It will, we will need an additional 5 positions, and $650,000 is the approximate cost. What I'm hoping is that we'll have enough savings in this fiscal year that we could ask for reappropriations if this were to pass for next fiscal year. Other than that, I know that you guys have had a long night, but I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Darlene. Does anybody have any question for Darlene? So that would conclude that. So now I think, is that the only person that we had from judiciary?
Yes.
Okay. So now we'll move on to the Office of the Public Defender. Is Lara there? Go ahead, you're on.
Hi, Chairman. I'm Matt Torr, the Deputy Director of the Public Defender's Office.
Welcome, Matt.
And I'm going to save Lara a little bit just because she was late in getting appointed, and we were well into the budget preparation. And I kind of, while we were in the middle of this COVID pandemic, it kind of saved her the hassle of getting up to speed on the budget. So I'll start the presentation, and she's certainly going to add some initiatives that we've engaged in over the past year. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. I'll try to be respectful of your time, but also give our budget request the attention it deserves. And I will briefly cover the specific Rhode Island challenges and initiatives as they relate to our budget. The single biggest challenge that our office is presented with, which it has been over the last few years, has been caseloads. And I think it's been clearly demonstrated in the slides and in our decision package attachments that that's our biggest challenge in threatening the constitutionally mandated service that we do provide. The ABA, American Bar Association, has promulgated some ethical caseload limits for indigent defense providers. And simply, it's a caseload assignment cap per attorney broken out by misdemeanors or felonies. And the premise is that after these threshold levels, we should really be re-examining whether we are living up to the constitutional mandate of zealous advocacy for our indigent population clients. And the best way to illustrate this, I know Attorney General has spoken about caseloads, and I think these numbers will demonstrate what the precarious position that we're in. So looking back at, so I'm going to look at just the pre-COVID years. So looking back at 2019, based on our staffing levels in the misdemeanor courtroom, we should have, based on those ethical caseload limits, assigned 2,916 cases. We assigned 9,938. That's almost 3 times more than what we should have. And the felony was not much better. The felony target assignments was 2,766. We actually assigned 4,350 cases to these attorneys. They're just absolutely swimming in cases. Now, admittedly, with the slowdown of court, that presents some challenges and also maybe a little bit of a reprieve of assignments. But considering how over the caseload caps that we were, it really was a drop in the bucket. So, 2021 is the first full year, fiscal year, that we had operating under this abridged criminal justice calendar. And based on those, our staffing, we should have assigned 3,100 cases in our misdemeanor courtroom. We assigned 5,939. And these are projected. I just did a projection on the first 3 quarters and then averaged those out for the fourth quarter. But we're seeing an upward tick as the courts is increasing their business. The felony assignments, again, we should have assigned 3,000 cases to our lawyers. We assigned 4,121. So each one of those cases is an individual, an indigent defendant who deserves zealous advocacy of their individual cases. And operating under these metrics, it is really comes to the tipping point of us not being able to satisfy our constitutional mandate and provide these services. So any temporary marginal decrease in the case assignments due to COVID are a drop in the bucket compared to the sheer volume of cases that we're handling. Now, COVID also presents another problem, is that we have case count problems now. So those are assignment caps, but once we're assigned in the case, in the district court, those cases are resolved very quickly, and in Superior Court, it takes a little bit more time. But now, with the understandably greatly reduced pretrial calendar and trial calendars and limited numbers of people that can come into the courthouse because of COVID, we're experiencing now a huge backlog of cases. So our ability to resolve many cases through plea have been greatly reduced by the numbers in terms of how we can manage these cases in the court as compared to what we did pre-COVID. The reduction of trials is also stopping it. So if somebody wants a trial, the inability of the court to operate the way that they did, and understandably so, pre-COVID, is backing those cases on. So, and this is coming on the heels of, as Attorney General Nerona mentioned, when his administration took over, they found thousands of cases, felony cases, uncharged in the basement that were lost in a file cabinet that they pumped through the system as quickly, and they just did their responsible thing. They rescreened those cases, but they put them in, and we bore the brunt of those cases coming in into our office on top of already of our excessive caseloads in 2018 and 19. And like the general had said, those cases aren't even fully through. They're in the middle of the snake, and it looks like the snake ate an elephant, if you really want to talk about that. So I think those two challenges, the caseloads and case counts, are our biggest challenges. And those data points that we've submitted to with our budget and our appendix, we respectfully requested an increase of 6 FTEs to address this crisis, and we believe that it's strongly supported by the data, and that we would ask that the House look favorably on our request, or in the alternative, look at the governor's recommendation of an increase of only 3 FTEs. But every little bit helps, and we have shown the capacity to do with less for years, but it's getting to the breaking point where we really need the assistance of these lawyers in the most earnest way. Another of our major obstacles is our technology. We have no case management system. We've had a case management system that was built by a lawyer over 20 years ago. It was built before e-filing. It was built before e-discovery. And it is incapable of growing with the demands and the electronic demands that we have now. Now, thankfully, over the last year, we were able to upgrade our internal Microsoft to get us into this century, to get us to Office to 365, because much of our Office and Windows software was severely outdated and not supported by any of the software providers. So those two caseloads and our technology are our biggest hurdles, and we hope that we will be able to in the years coming. We've already been talking to several providers about addressing the case management system, but that's not included in this budget. But it may be something we're looking to through the state or through federal grants to be able to get us in line with other public defender agencies throughout the country who are on similar systems like our judiciary is when they switched over to the Odyssey file and serve system. Now, the good parts, the initiatives of what we've been doing. We've taken the COVID kind of pause to, and this was really at the earnest of our community liaison who deals with expungements. And I know we've talked about this a little bit in Attorney General Nerona's presentations about expungements, and I think members of the committee know that that is a very valuable tool, especially for our clientele, when they're looking for employment opportunities, housing opportunities, educational opportunities, coaching on their kids' teams when they've got some expungible thing on their record that should have been dismissed. So our community liaison had noticed an alarming pattern that there were many people coming in to get expungements done that, per the statute, should have been automatically expunged, but they weren't. And then they had to deal with us doing an intake on them, finding assigning that to an attorney, dealing with the caps in terms of how many expungements we can file in a day that the district court had put on our office. So that just backed up the numbers of expungements that we had to do. And we're talking about thousands and thousands of cases. But thankfully, with the pause and the clerk's office slowdown, we did reach out to the judiciary, both the Supreme Court and the district court, and talk to them about developing a system where we could do a lot of pre-screening and then get them a Excel spreadsheet with thousands of names of cases that should have been automatically expunged. And the district court has been working on those. We're still not through, but they've been working on those in chunks and verifying our own research that they are expungible and that they are eligible for automatic expungement, and then that being done administratively without having to wait for a hearing and then also further sap our resources. So that's been a project that's been ongoing. We're hopeful to continue that and expand that into the Superior Court as well. And that's just an opportunity that we found during the slowdown of COVID, that we were able to focus on these things that are really, really important to our clients and to your constituents. Secondly, an initiative that we just began working on at the invitation of Superior Court, specifically Judge Rogers, and through the leadership of Chief Oates of the Woonsocket Police Department with cooperation from Attorney General Arona, is on a pilot program that is called a Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program. And I'm not sure if any of you are aware of these programs, but it's modeled after a program out in Seattle, Washington, and mostly focused in on the opioid epidemic and those with, occurring or co-occurring disorders, substance abuse or mental illness. And those have been the biggest drag on our criminal justice system as a whole, from Department of Corrections to my office, to the Attorney General's office, to probation. And a lot of times it's really the consensus of everyone involved in those criminal justice cases that this isn't a criminal justice problem. This is a mental health or a substance use disorder problem that should be dealt with medically. And what they do with specific nonviolent offenses, and the Attorney General is certainly going to weigh in on what those type of offenses could be, but those that are eligible for, who would have been arrested and brought to a court and then referred to our office, would not be brought to court at all. They would be arrested, and then they would be handed off to a warm handoff to a social service provider to set up wraparound service immediately, because the data has shown that's where the fall off is. When the arrest happens and then they go to the prison for a few weeks and then get out, and then we're talking a couple of months of trying to get them into treatment, we've kind of missed our opportunity. But when it's done early and it's done quickly and it's done in lieu of accessing the criminal justice system, outcomes are better and less money is spent all around. So selfishly, that may mean less cases for us, which we are always in favor of. And then altruistically, it's going to be better outcomes for the people, and it's not going to be a drain on the serious felony violent offenses that we need to pay attention to and devote exceptional resources to. And this is a program that's just in the beginning stages, but we are super excited about being involved in this, and I would not be surprised if we're back advising this committee or other committees about this program, because we really think that it's a really unique opportunity to collaboratively work together with the court, with the Attorney General, and with local police departments to develop a program that possibly could be expanded elsewhere throughout the state. And with that, there's some other initiatives that Lara was very eager on initiating once she was sworn in as the new public defender, and I'm going to tip it off to her. But if you have any specific budget questions, I will save her the the questioning, so you can send them my way. But with that, I'll just tip it off to Lara. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to just continue with what Matt was discussing and focus in on 3 initiatives that I think really describe how the Public Defender's Office is fulfilling our obligation and our role to the Constitution to provide quality representation to indigent people. The first is that, when COVID disrupted life as we know it, but also court proceedings, we took that opportunity to change the way that we provided representation on felony cases, to really focus in on best practices. And what that means in criminal cases is to provide vertical representation. So one attorney from the start of the case to the end. And the reality is we hadn't been doing that before in felony cases. For many years, what we had done is every single felony case that came through the system, except those that were charged in the grand jury, we assigned to one attorney in one courtroom, the PAC courtroom, the pre-arraignment conference courtroom. And those are all the cases that Matt already gave you the numbers on. Our clients weren't happy with how we were representing them. We weren't happy with what we were doing. We weren't getting involved early in a case. Often we weren't able to even return phone calls. And the way we were doing that representation had inefficiencies. When a case moved from that pre-arraignment courtroom to the regular trial calendar, we were assigning a new attorney to the case, redoing some of the work that had already been done. So we took the COVID disruption to end that practice, to assign a trial attorney from the start of each case. What that means is that we were doing better and more efficient representation for all our felony clients. So, for instance, referrals coming from an attorney on a client's case to our social worker division to get involved and to try to find help or counseling for addiction or mental health problems that our clients were having. Those started to come earlier because we were involved with our clients from day one. Attorneys started to do investigations right in the beginning of a case, and a national marker on good practices from the defense bar focuses in on whether investigations are being done and when they're being done. The reason being that you can't investigate a case if you haven't met with the client, if you haven't read and looked at what was going on in a case. So we've made these changes in our representation, I think starting about 6 months ago. And so what we're also seeing is our clients are happier. They're better represented. They have one attorney that they know, and that attorney doesn't change. And cases are being resolved more quickly. And with better information coming from us to the judges and to the court system. So that's a big change that we undertook this year. And it required a lot of upfront work from our attorneys. And I'm so proud and happy to say that they did it, that they jumped into doing this work because they knew it was better for the people we serve. A second area that we've really tried to embrace, led by our social work department again, is we've started one of the first medical legal partnerships in the United States where we've allied with doctors at the Lifespan Transition Clinic to work together in collaboration. When our clients are patients of the clinic, when clinic patients are clients of the Public Defender's Office, we have an immediate agreement of release of information, and we work together to provide the courts information about the health outcomes of our clients, because it's no secret to the doctors at Lifespan that the criminal justice system, incarceration, probation, court fines, all these types of things, impacts the medical health of their patients. The data is there to support that. We haven't always known that, and we haven't always acted upon that. We're doing that now, and in fact, along with some of the doctors at Lifespan Transition Clinic, we co-authored an article in the New England Journal of Medicine. I'd be happy to send it along to you at the conclusion of this hearing. The last thing I want to just touch on briefly, and Attorney General Nerone, I think, did a great job of talking about this, is Superior Court diversion. So Matt alluded to the fact that public defender caseloads go down when cases leave the criminal justice system. And that's why we as an office embrace any kinds of ideas that help divert cases pre-arrest, pre-charge from the criminal justice system. Now, the Superior Court diversion program involves cases that are already charged, but it's been a fabulous program that has really taken off this year. And what we've done is we've said, in order to staff diversion court, we're going to pull an attorney from a different division, we're going to pull a secretary, and we're going to invest our managers in figuring out a way to do the work so that our clients are represented well in a courtroom where if our clients follow the diversion contract and do the things that are asked of them, such as paying restitution, participating in counseling, their cases will be dismissed and expunged. And as you know, that type of resolution really benefits our clients. After completion of the diversion program, they aren't burdened by a criminal record. Their housing isn't affected by the criminal record. Their ability to get a job. So that program has been a real, I think, revolutionary thing that's happened at Superior Court. But it's required resources from us. It requires us to move a body from one courtroom to a brand new courtroom, and to move a secretary, to move managerial resources there, to manage our staff to make that new process work. But we know it's the right thing to do. We're convinced that court is a place we need to be and we want to be. What we need are the resources to be able to cover the other courtrooms that we already always covered before the new courtroom set up. So in requesting the new attorneys that were part of our budget request, it's efforts like our work in the Superior Court diversion program that we're taking into consideration when we make the request. Attorney General said, now where's the ask? The ask from us is that we don't have enough bodies to do all the good work that we should be doing. And it isn't simply that we're focused in the public defender's office on doing our work well. We are. But the services we provide, which is the work we do, the legal work we do, is required by our Constitution. And so our budget request and the request of the governor, which I'm so thankful for, is that we're asking for the resources we need to meet our obligations. I thank you so much for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, although I have a feeling you probably want to hear from Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Lara. Quick question. So in reference to the indigent population, what percentage of your caseloads are they?
Of our 100% indigent.
Okay. And Matt, I think for you, the process of expungement, right? The process for expungement going from your office to the district court. What does it look like once it gets to the district court?
So there's the process that I spoke about earlier. There are a tranche of cases that should have been done, I'll call them administratively, and that's the data we're providing to the courts to get those done. The regular course of our clients who come in, or clients who are charged now with new offenses, but they may have some offenses on their record that should have been expunged before. Our lawyers are assigned to those cases, and when they're doing their, looking over the discovery package and looking at the PCI, at that point we would be looking to file a motion for expungement, make sure they fit the statutory requirements, and then filing that motion in either the district or the superior court, and then getting a hearing date and asking that a judge expunge or seal those cases.
Is that a lengthy process, or?
Is it a what?
Is it a lengthy process once it gets into the?
No. Well, actually, let me clarify that. Lengthy in terms of the time in court, no. There's a little bit of a legwork in terms of trying to make sure that they fit the statutory requirement, but that's not unduly. Where the length comes in is the time from us filing the motion to us getting our hearing. That sometimes can be 3 months out. And, now with COVID, everything's been augmented. So I'm using our pre-COVID kind of track record of these cases and the problems which we had. So, we've got a client who doesn't even have any new charges, who just comes in, talks to our community liaison, or our community liaison is out, doing some community engagement and comes upon somebody who says, look, this is stopping me from getting housing. Is this expungible? We'll do a quick workup and say, yes, it is. He'll contact one of the lawyers, make sure they're indigent, do a financial eligibility. If they are indigent, then they're eligible for our services. And if they were our clients and there's no conflict, then we file that motion to expunge. Once that motion is filed, though, that's where the length comes in, where we would be getting dates. We could file in January, and they'd say, okay, you have an expungement date in March or April, and that was not out of the realm of regularity. And we've been talking to the Chief Judge LaFazia in the District Court, and now as we're going to expand this into Superior Court, I presume we will be talking to the Superior Court as well. But that's an area of length in terms of this process that we really would like to shorten and tighten up.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Lara, for all the wonderful work that you do for those who can least afford it.
Thank you.
Is there any question for either Matt or Lara? So then, thank you guys for staying on. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Have a good
Thank
day.
you.
Important.
All right.
Thank you.
So now our last group is the State Budget Office. Is anybody there? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sharon.
Before you get on, Representative Quattrochi just got on, so I just want to acknowledge him and have him be here in present. Clerk? Okay.
Chairman, this is Joe Cadiga, the Deputy Budget Officer. I was here to listen in and make sure that I was available to respond to any questions, but I don't have any remarks to make tonight.
Thank you very much, Joe. No one has any questions, so you get off scot-free today.
Thank you.
So now we will go on the calls on the phones for the community at large who may be weighing in. I guess we have Jacqueline Goldman. Good afternoon, Jacqueline, or good evening, Jacqueline. You're on.
Oh, thank you so much. So my name is Jacqueline Goldman, and I'm here just representing myself. And I am here to oppose the budget set for public safety, specifically the money allocated for police barracks and expanding the ACI. So I work specifically with people who use drugs and overdose prevention. And, I was really compelled by what the public defenders were just talking about and how police response really doesn't help any of these people. We see time and time again, the state police are violent. They're more violent than most other police. I think they're like 53% more violent than like the average, like over the top of the bell curve. And giving them more money for more things will not actually help the people of Rhode Island. Further, instead of expanding the ACI, what we should be doing is decarcerating people. There are a lot of people in there who don't really need to be for nonviolent crimes, generally drug-related crimes, which, as the public defender has mentioned, are more of a crime of mental health and extreme poverty as instead of actually crime as we talk about it. So that's all I really wanted to say, and that I hope you'll consider not approving the $35 million for the budget for the barracks, and consider decarcerating and changing the way that we view criminal justice to actually help the needs of the people in this state.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you, Jacqueline, for your comment. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Next, we have Ames Colt. Kirk. Okay. Welcome, Kirk.
Hello, how are you?
We're good, thank you. You're on.
Wonderful. I'll be brief. My name is Kirk Robinson. I live at 11 Eagle Street in Providence. Thank you for the time to chat. I understand we're talking about the budget, and that within this budget, our governor, I guess it was Gina Raimondo at the time, recommended $35 million to construct new state police barracks, to consolidate some existing ones. Yeah, I mean, I would not want that in the budget. I think this is an opportunity in our time here as a state and as a country to reconsider how we invest money in the police and whether or not the public and possibly more important, the public's general health are well served by providing more funding for the police. I mean, I'm a resident of Providence, and the Providence city budget disproportionately is taken up by police who are over-militarized. And I look at that in contrast to the need for affordable housing in our city and the need for more reliable infrastructure, like transportation, better roads, the types of things that all people would benefit from. And I just don't believe the police at this point provide a public good. I don't. There's just not a lot of evidence for me to see that. Even in Providence too, where I know maybe we haven't made the headlines like other places like Minneapolis. There have still been enough reports of abuse on citizens for engaging in everyday activities, First Amendment activities, right to protest and assembly and so forth. So, yeah, all that to say, I don't think we should be allocating $35 million, to continue to support something that I think needs to be drastically reformed. In a nutshell, that's it.
Thank you, Kirk, for your comments.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sammy. Welcome, Sammy. You're on.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much. My name is Sammy Amki. I'm a resident of Providence, and I'm here to testify against the proposed $35 million increase in the capital or the state police budget to build the police barracks. I just wanted to start off by saying I think the fact people have to hop on the phone to talk about this after the year of mass protests and revelations around police brutality and the bloat of police budgets as opposed to money for housing and healthcare and education. It's kind of shocking, but I continue to not be shocked, and I would urge everyone on this committee to take note of the movements across the state of Rhode Island, in pretty much every single city in the state of Rhode Island, against bloated police budgets and spending on police in lieu of spending for healthcare, housing, education, etc., and jobs. Rather than trying to criminalize people over and over again, we can invest in their future, in their education, their healthcare. I think the last thing I wanted to say is, this is not all happening in isolation. I think all of you sitting on the committee know that there's a lot of eyes and ears watching you all when you take these votes and when you consider these budgets. This will not sort of be lost to the rest of us. Certainly the primary season is not far off. So I think I urge all you to consider voting no, and strongly urge you to vote no on these bills, because if not, I do think you will face some backlash from your constituencies who have clearly over and over again said they want money for jobs, healthcare, education, housing, and not more money for police, fancy cars, fancy guns. We want care for our communities. So thank you so much for allowing me to testify, and I hope this testimony is well received.
Thank you, Sammy. Thank you for your testimony.
Yeah, of course.
Next, we have Ellen. Ellen, are you on? Okay. Hi, Nathan, you're on. Hi, Nathan, you're on.
Hi, good evening. Can you really quick remind me, this is the Finance and Budget Committee, right?
Yes, this is the subcommittee on public safety.
On public safety, that's right. Thank you so much. I was calling tonight to comment on, and particularly in opposition to, a line item for a significant amount of additional funding for new police barracks. And my reason for doing so is quite simple. I think in this state right now, we are already dramatically overspending on police and heavily, in air quotes, public safety. These are departments that have spent the last year terrorizing and assaulting even citizens. In fact, landing at least one young man in a hospital. And we are in a difficult budget year. I think this is a time when we need to be prioritizing services and departments that will be aiding people economically, looking at education, looking at housing, and trying to cut back on services like the police, which are not only not helping the community during this difficult time, are actively hurting it. I think line items like this, increasing the size and scope of a police department that needs to be dramatically downsizing, is the exact opposite direction that we need to be going in. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sammy, for your testimony.
Goodbye.
Ellen, welcome. You're on. Hi, Helen. You're on.
Oh, thank you. Great. My name's Ellen. I live in Providence, and just wanted to call to voice my opinion. I understand that there's the intention to put a significant amount of money towards new police barracks, and I just wanted to comment that that feels to me like not a very responsible use of taxpayer money right now, especially with so many dire needs in the community. I was thinking perhaps that money could instead be put towards affordable housing or support with education. I know our schools need a lot of help, possibly money towards new green infrastructure, or maybe even putting that money towards building systems that ideally could replace the police anyways, such as emergency mental health response or training community members in things like de-escalation. So just wanted to share my view that I think that money could be put towards a better use right now.
Well, Helen, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Have a good night. Do we have Andrew Poyan? Andrew, good evening. You're
Hello.
on.
Hi, Chairman Abney. My name is Andrew Poya. I live in Providence, and I'm calling in opposition to the vast majority of the public safety portion of the budget, the state budget, specifically the $35 million for the new Southern Barracks, the $20.1 million for renovations to the medium security facility, the $4.4 million for counter drug training facility, and the $448,000 for the public safety master plan. The most secure and safe neighborhoods are not neighborhoods that have the most policing or the biggest military. They're those that have the most resources. And I would rather see our state funding go towards public housing and go towards making sure everyone is fed and has water and their utilities on, as well as going towards more after-school programs, public transit, and a better education system. And I don't think that this is the wisest use of our money. The $4.4 million towards counter drug training facility, I'd like to point out, I think that we should be focusing on substance use disorder as a public health and a health issue, and not a criminal issue, and that we should be spending that money on a substance use disorder facility where patients are treated as people and not locked up for drug use. So I hope that you and the committee listen to the public today and do not move forward with this significant amount of money into more policing and more military spending. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poyan, for your testimony. Any question for the witnesses? Hearing none, I'll conclude the meeting of the Public Safety Subcommittee. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.